Good evening, good afternoon, good night. Depending on where you are in the world, you are joining or where you're joining us from today, we're so delighted to be presenting the 8th in our Windows, Mirrors, and Doors webinar series. Rich conversations with children's book authors, educators, and advocates on the vital importance of representation in children's literature. You can find all the previous episodes on the events tab of our website, parentchildplus.org. Today may seem like a divergence from our theme, but it isn't. The issue of representation in math is one that children face throughout their education. So today's conversation is a reminder and an inspiration that everyone can do math, everyone can be a mathematician, no matter what your race, your gender, your age, or what language you speak at home. Today's discussion will focus on children's books that have math themes and the importance of math play. It will shine a light on the impact that representative books about math concepts, diverse mathematicians, and how math is all around us have on the well-being and social emotional development of children. Our wonderful panelists will highlight the importance of all children and families seeing themselves in books about math, learning about math in joyful, playful, and meaningful ways, and making it a regular part of their early learning experiences. Thank you for joining us today. Enjoy these conversations and please type questions into the chat. We will be leaving time at the end of the panels to respond. Now it is my pleasure to introduce you to Kirsten Bohl, Mathical Book Prize Coordinator at the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute. Welcome, Kirsten.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I'm really excited to be here tonight with you all. And really honored to be part of the Windows, Mirrors, and Doors series with Parent Child Plus. The Mathical Book Prize comes out of the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute, otherwise known as SL Math, Simons Laufer Mathematical Sciences Institute. We have a lot of great partners, including the Institute for Advanced Study and the Children's Book Council, the National Council of Teachers of English, the National Council of Teachers of Math, and we wouldn't be here without the Feyerdahl Foundation and Erwin and Joan Jacobs. Why am I telling you this? Because it takes many people together to put on this book list. So we have 4 wonderful book authors tonight who are going to be part of this discussion that Sarah has introduced. And each of them has written a book in the Mathical Book Prize series. What are Mathical books? They are books for kids from age 2 all the way to age 18, and they inspire a love of math. So 2 of the books tonight are fiction, 2 are nonfiction, and as you might guess, they do in fact shine a light on different ways that kids might see themselves as mathematicians in the world. So I would love to welcome our 4 panelists and have them come up on the stage with me, and I'll tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll have a conversation. And while they're joining me, I'll just let you know that we've got a great resource guide for you all after the webinar, where you can learn more about their books and lots of other fantastic resources too. So I wonder if the other 4 could join me on stage. Here they come. Oh, look at these fantastic authors. All right, and there's one more coming. Okay, so welcome all 4 of you. I want to just introduce you a little bit, and then we'll get right into some great questions. So Julia Finley Mosca is a journalist. She's the author of the Amazing Scientists series of children's biographies, which was awarded the Best Science Trade Books K-12 by the National Science Teaching Association. And her biography, The Girl with a Mind for Math, The Story of Ray Montague, was a Mathical Honor book in the grades K through 2 category. Jen Arena, formerly an editorial director at Random House Books for Young Readers. Jen has written over 50 books for kids, both fiction and nonfiction. Her book, Marta, Big and Small, in addition to being a Mathical honor book, was a School Library Journal Top 10 Latinx book, a CCBC Choices book, and it was on the Huffington Post's Best Picture Books honorable mention list. She's also got a fabulous bilingual board book, Besos for Baby, which has won some beautiful awards and honors. And her most recent picture book, Acorn Was a Little Wild, came out in March of 2022. And Jen lives in Tampa, Florida with her husband Dario and a very bossy black dog. Songju Mademika is a former software engineer with Motorola. She grew up in China, and she's an award-winning children's book author. And she lives here in the US. Her latest book, To Yu's Discovery, Finding a Cure for Malaria, was named by the Mighty Girls as one of their books of the year in 2021. Her picture book, Couchong Weighs an Elephant, was a Mathical honor book. And took some other prizes as well, at least 4 other prizes from various fantastic groups. When she's not writing, Songju loves attending to her garden and shooting her next special photograph. And last but not least, Ivan Brunetti has published several graphic novels and has taught courses on editorial illustration and comics at the University of Chicago and Columbia College Chicago. His drawings have appeared in The New Yorker, the New York Times Magazine, and McSweeney's, among other publications. And he served as editor for Yale University Press's 2-volume anthology of graphic fiction, cartoons, and true stories. I know Ivan because of his Mathical honor book, 3x4. So welcome, all of you. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. We're going to spend about half an hour together digging into some topics, and then we have 2 more amazing speakers who are going to round out the hour for you. So I won't say more about them yet. We'll let them speak for themselves when it's time. All right, friends. So Songju, my first question is for you. Why did you decide to write a children's book with a mathematics theme?
It's all start with a concert. It's Mozart's music that inspired me to write this story. In 2012, my twin daughters, both violinists, played a beautiful piece of music by Mozart. It's called Table Music for Two. 2 players standing opposite each other to share the same piece of the music. One read the music right side up, and another one read upside down. Rather than sounding disjointed, the music is harmonious and totally beautiful. Imagine that. Mozart must be have been thinking of the sounding, the score, and the space, timing, the order, and the harmony all at once. And that's just incredible. It's a masterpiece of musical mathematics. This music by Mozart, musical prodigy, remind me of Chao Chong, the famous Chinese prodigy. So I share his story with my family, and they all love it. So I decided to write a book about Chao Chong to share his story and his creative way to find a solution to find out the weight of the elephant 2,000 years ago without a modern day scale. So that's how this story started.
Thank you. Now I'm sitting here musing about music and math and how connected they are, and about how one passion can really lead to another. That's really interesting. And I'm gathering that your book is based on a true story of 2,000 years ago.
Yes.
That's pretty nifty. All right. Ivan, I'm curious. How about yourself? Why a kid's book with a math theme?
Yeah, so the previous book I had done, which was my first book for kids, is called Wordplay, and it's about compound words. And the publisher of Toon Books, my editor and publisher, Francoise Mouly, suggested maybe the next book could be about numbers, just kind of elemental things, so words and then numbers seem like a natural progression. And I actually, in some of my cartooning classes that I've taught, I do an exercise with college students. It's actually based on something I read in a book called Peanuts Jubilee, which was the 25th anniversary celebration of Peanuts by Charles Schulz, who's my favorite cartoonist. And if you look at my drawings, they're very much inspired by him. And it was a reproduction of a page he had drawn in, I think, 3rd grade. And I remember his teacher's name was Miss Pardo. I don't know why I have this trivial memory for things, but the kids had to draw three of something and as many things as they could think of. And I thought, and they have the page that Charles Schulz drew when he was in 3rd grade. And it's really inventive. You could tell like he's a natural cartoonist. So I thought this might be fun with college students. And so I would have them do 75 drawings. So it had to be three of each of 25 things. And there's so many interpretations with that were inventive, creative, different ways of looking at how you could think of numbers and sets. So I thought, well, it might be fun to do a book where that exercise is done by little kids. And that's what essentially happens in the 3x4 book, is that it's a classroom and they're given this assignment. And then you see that there's 12 characters that are children, and they kind of each have their own interpretation of how to divide things. So they add up to 12 or multiply into 12. I mean, that's really the whole point of it, is trying to make math like fun, inventive, and creative. And it's tied to drawing as well. That's kind of how it got started. And somehow I came up with a story where, there's a beginning, middle, end where they do this project, and there's kind of a funny ending at the end of it.
I love how the kids in your story each sort of tackle the invitation a different way. And it's you hardly remember you're in a math class. You just know that something really fun and interesting is happening with those
Yeah,
kids.
that's a good way to put it, because our existence is one big math class, because we use math all the time, right? So we kind of forget that it's actually completely intertwined with everything in our life. So actually, that's nice to hear that it doesn't feel like an assignment. It feels like something like a fun exploration. That was sort of the goal.
All right. Well, I am curious. Julia, I'm going to put you on the spot. What was your experience of math as a child?
Well, I think it's interesting because people always assume, since I'm an author, that language and English must have been my best subjects in school. And I did really enjoy writing. I'm not going to deny that. And I enjoyed English, but math was always my strongest subject. And I think growing up in the 80s, I don't know if other people had similar experiences, but we really didn't. I don't recall ever reading a story about math or reading really about mathematicians. And I was under the false impression that maybe a lot of people were, that the only career paths would be like accounting or becoming a math teacher. And since neither one of those really appealed so much to me, I was kind of, I think, pushed by maybe my teachers and people in my life to go a different route. And no one really ever talked to me about all the possibilities in the math field. And it wasn't until I got to college, when I already had established that I was going, toward theater and journalism, that my statistics teacher tried to talk me into becoming a psychology major, which really kind of took me off guard, because I thought, what does math have to do with psychology? Psychology just struck me as such a compassionate field and a field of emotions. And that, to me, at that point in time, math and that didn't fit together in my mind. But I think that kids now are hearing all these stories and seeing the way that math is used in these unexpected fields. And I think what's cool now is that I've kind of gone full circle, and my books that I write are all in rhyme. And rhyme is math. It's a puzzle. and it's fitting fitting syllables and meter together in a mathematical way, because rhythm is rhythm and music, as we spoke about a couple minutes ago, is math. And so I'm really, happy to be kind of using math in my career now.
Julie, it's really interesting as you speak. I'm hearing you talk about sort of how sometimes kids can grow up and they have a kind of a narrow idea of what math is or what a mathematician is. And yet you're sitting with your beautiful book behind you. And here you've written this, and not just this one, but you've written this biography, this kid's biography of a young girl who changed how ships navigate across the ocean. So I know you're going to say more about that later, but I just love, we need more books that do that, and you're on my screen, at least you're sitting next to Songju, who's writing about this, kid who figured out the problem the grownups couldn't solve 2,000 years ago about how to weigh an elephant. And, I just personally, I love the books that have the sort of the kids in charge, kids learning things, kids doing. So I find those really inspiring, speaking for myself, but thank you for sharing your experience. Jen, I'm going to put you on the spot. What would you like to say about your experience of math as a young person?
Well, it's super interesting because I had a very different experience about math than Julia. When I was a kid, I did not think I was very good at math. I was fine at math, but I really gravitated towards art and reading, and my least favorite subjects were math and gym. But when I was a kid, math felt kind of different from where we've evolved to today, even though math itself hasn't changed. It was really back then subtraction and addition, multiplication and division. And I was not a numbers person, though I had a very logical mind, but I never thought of logic as being math. As I got older, though, I started gravitating more towards math, especially once we started replacing the numbers with the letters, or talking about stuff like algebra and trigonometry and rotating solids in space and things that were very visual. And I discovered that even though I wanted to box myself in as an art and literature person, there was so much more there, and that I became better in math as I got older once my definition of math expanded. So even though as a kid I didn't think I was good at math, like Julia, I was sort of in the same sort of box where it was only when things changed in myself that I realized that actually I was good at math. I had a very logical brain, and then it was just my definition of what math was needed to change.
Thanks. And I know we're going to hear more about your book later, but I can't wait because, Marta, big and small, she is big compared to some things, but she's small compared to others. And that's math, friends. That's math. Yeah. So very, very fun. Songju, did you want to reflect a little bit about growing up?
Yes. When I was a child, I never had any math workbook or activities outside my regular school math class. But I loved playing card games since I was 5. I learned card sequences, suits, and jokers with superpowers, and I loved all of it. And I also learned to remember cards and predict probabilities. All this, I think those are really practical math skills. And all these skills really help me excel in my school math class. So I suggest parents, to play some fun games involve the numbers with your children, like puzzles and board games works too. In my house, we play a lot of card games, and all my daughters are great card games players, and I think it apparently worked. Today, my oldest daughter is a psychologist and a professor at the University of Chicago. And my second daughter, a sophomore at UIUC, and just received an interview invitation from IBM. So I believe all the games we played helped.
Mm-hmm. And they were fun too. Yes.
Yes.
And friends, you will find a lot more recommendations about games in that packet that you're going to see. And believe me, if you've met professional mathematicians in your world, they love games and puzzles. They really, really do. So it's not just Songju's house. So, and lots of kids will love it. And they, they kind of forget they're doing math, but they're actually doing really deep things. So games are a key. All right. So let's talk about representation and how important it is for kids to see themselves in their books. And each of you has done that in one way or another in the books that you're bringing to us today. And I'm really grateful for that because there's still not enough books that do that, let alone books about math that do that. So, so Julia, could you say more about why it's important for children to see themselves reflected in the books they read at home or in the classroom?
Sure. I think actually this lady who I wrote about can say it better. She is Dr. Patricia Bath, and she invented laser cataract surgery. And she had a saying, you have to, what was it? You have to see it to be it. I'm sure that we've heard, sayings like that before, but it's really so simple but true. One of the parts in the book is she had a family friend right here who was the only, I believe, Black professional, she said, that she had in her immediate surroundings. The rest of the adults in her life were doing more, I think, blue collar work. And so she had never encountered a Black doctor before until she met this man, a friend of her family's. And she said that it was meeting him that allowed her to know that there was the possibility that she could be a doctor. It had never even really crossed her mind, but she knew that she loved math and science. And so that right there just speaks to why it's important for kids to see the possibilities, whether it's in books or TV or movies or within your own community, the real people around you. Because you don't know what you can do until you see it.
Absolutely. And thanks for your books that do that. Songju, would you like to speak to that question as well?
Yes. Before I came to the United States, I was a PhD student in geophysics in Paris. I remember a French student asked me, "Did you learn integrals in China?" An integral is an advanced math concept. Frankly, I was quite insulted. And I answered, "Of course I did. Do you know a Chinese mathematician calculated pi to 7 digits in the 5th century? That's his European peers didn't achieve it until 1,000 years later." So I never forget that conversation. This inspired me to tell Chao Chong's story. So I hope this book will give Asian kids a direct role model and help their self-esteem. So they can see Asian kids can achieve great feats too. And we need diverse book, like all children from a different background should see themselves reflected in the books they read. That's so important.
Thank you. Yeah, knowing our history and knowing the diversity of that history is so important. And I hear that a lot from children and parents and educators. And there are some books for older kids on the Mathical list that do that from a more sort of wide angle point of view as well. But yeah, it takes all those books. Thank you. Ivan, I'm going to put you on the spot again. I'm wondering if you have a math hero or heroine in your life. Why am I asking this question? Because a lot of the people on this call have written books about people that I would consider math heroes or heroines. And I'm just curious who has shown up in your life that way.
Well, gee, the way I would answer, I'll give a more humorous answer first than the real answer, which might also be humorous. But I mean, I could say, Pythagoras, because there's a mystical element to math. I've also been reading Wittgenstein's Tractatus, which is logic, which is math too. And I think of math as a language, a verbal system. And that's probably because I had to learn the English language when I was 8 years old, when my family moved from Italy. So I tend to think of everything, including cartooning, as a language. I teach everything as a language. But I would say, actually, how I would answer this is the people that did Schoolhouse Rock are my math heroes. David McCall, who's not a mathematician, he was an advertising executive, came up with this idea because his children were memorizing rock and roll lyrics. And like, why can't they apply that to math or some other topics, right? And so he got the idea to make things like math visual and into cartoons with memorable songs. And they really do work as mnemonic devices. And I think they're kind of there's a lot of good ones in the Schoolhouse Rock series, but some of the math ones are quite moving, I think, and touching. And they also get to like a poetic aspect of mathematics too. And sometimes what they relate numbers to, like the one about the number 3, it also touches on like there's a certain mystical quality to it as well. And they kind of wrap it all into like a 3-minute song, like the practical and the mystical kind of coexist. And I was just thinking about that recently because I don't think I would have been able to even do the book. I'll hold it up. Like 3 times 4 is about multiplication. And I'm like, I'm sure that was all in the back of my mind and burned into my mind. I was not that great. I was fine at math. I was lucky that in the growing up in Italy, like we covered certain math topics sooner than my American counterparts. And when I came to America, like I didn't know a word of English, but my 3rd grade teacher, Miss Bernice Graham, who's like one of the great human beings, I think she was so nice. She understood, like, because I could do math and I could draw, like I would figure out the language. It would just take a little time. And my sister wasn't as lucky. She was held back. She was in 1st grade. So she's in the middle of 1st grade learning a new language. And, I moved from a farm in Italy to the south side of Chicago. So a little bit different, right? But anyway, so I think a lot of my life has been trying to translate things into languages and try to understand things. And maybe that shift kind of did something to me where I feel like that's important and I really appreciate the people that help me learn things, because you forget, like, I know it when I was little, I don't know how I figured things out, but I know somebody showed me things and taught me things. And I think that's maybe why I ended up in education, which was not my thought that I would ever end up in, but long answer. But Schoolhouse Rock, David McCall.
Schoolhouse Rock. Thank you. I'm just going to name some of the themes that you mentioned, not because we can go into depth with them, but because you mentioned a lot of important themes. And I just want to say the ones that I heard that are sticking. I heard math as a language, which is a powerful idea. I heard math as visual. I heard the importance of role models, yes, but also teachers, peers, educators, guides, peer-to-peer, who shows us the way. I also heard the poetics and the mystical side of math, and all of that started with a couple of historical figures and a cartoon show that a couple of us on the camera smiled, which tells you how old we are. But now I want to go back and listen and hear those again and see how they do with representation, because I have not watched those or heard those since I was quite young. So thank you. We're covering a lot. All right, friends. We have another about 10 minutes here in which we might look at something that you all want to share from your books. And I'm going to start with Julia, who wanted to show us, in her view, the most mind-blowing part of her book. So I'm ready to have my mind blown.
Yes, I think this is the part that always shocks the children and the adults when I read this book. Ray Montague, she was a brilliant mathematician. She wanted to study engineering in college, but was told that Black women could not get a degree in engineering. So instead, she was an administrative assistant for the Navy. And what she did is basically shadowed all of the engineers. She taught herself how to do the job of an engineer and basically wound up doing it. And then at one point, President Nixon needed a ship he needed a submarine, and he needed it really fast. And back then, the engineers and the architects and all the people that did the blueprints for ships had to do everything by hand. And so Ray actually developed the very first computer software program to design a ship by computer. And she designed that ship in less than a day. And basically, when she did that, she stunned everybody. Nobody could believe it. So a part of my book says, you did it, they cheered. And her boss had to say that her quick mind for math had in fact saved the day. But then comes the shocking part. The end? No, not quite. When Ray's ship was unveiled, only white men could go, and Ray's invite not mailed. So there was a huge party, and the woman responsible for building this ship watched from the window because she was not allowed to attend the party. And so that is definitely, I think, the most mind-blowing part of her story. Thank goodness she passed away a couple of years ago. Her story was told before she passed away. And it just goes to show that even to this day, women, Black women, women of color are underrepresented in the field of engineering. But they were always there. So she was there. And just imagine if this story had been able to be told years and years and years ago, maybe there would be more women in the field. And so that is why it is so important that stories like this are being told now.
Thank you. So I wonder if one of the others of you, whether it's Jen or Songju or Ivan, would like to share an aspect of your book. Give us a glimpse, give us a page, help us dive in a little, because I know folks in the chat are curious to hear a little bit more about your books.
I'll share a little about Marta, Big and Small.
Okay.
Marta, it's a bilingual kind of girl power book. It's about perspective.
Bring her onto the camera. You're on the camera. She's not yet.
There
we got Marta now. Go for it.
I got Marta. So it's all about perspective and how Marta is different things depending on what you compare it to. So compared to a bug, Marta is very big, grande, but compared to an elephant, she's very small. And so I think what's super interesting about this book is it shows that kids are not just one thing or another. And I think that really speaks to the whole topic of the discussion today, that you can be big and you can be small. You can be loud and you can be quiet. You can love to run, but also love art. You can love math and you can love to draw. You can do all sorts of things, and you don't have to be just one thing. This is a bilingual book, so you can speak English at school, you can speak Spanish at home, and that you don't have, as I talked about, when I was a kid, I tried to put myself into different categories, but I think it's wonderful for kids to learn that they don't have to limit themselves, that they can contain multitudes, and that they can be so many different things. They can be fast, they can be slow, and they can be different things in different situations. And I think that that's one thing about the book that really I love, when kids realize that as they're going through the book. And then when they also see themselves reflected in it, whether they speak English or Spanish, all kids can come to this book and understand the other aspect. If they speak English, they can get some of the Spanish along the way. And if they speak Spanish, they see Spanish reflected in the book. They also see some in the English as well.
I love all those different identities that kids can have. That's awesome. Songju, I saw you. Your eye was going to find a page and you were going to hold it up. Am I right? If I'm wrong, it's okay. Just say no thanks. All right.
Yes.
Give us a glimpse. Give us a glimpse of
Yes.
the phone.
So this question is 2,000 years ago. They don't have a modern day scale, but how to figure out the weight of the gigantic elephant. So when everyone failed, and the 6 years old Chung came out the idea. What they do, he guided everyone to the lake, and he led the elephant onto a boat. And then he marked when the weight of elephant made the boat sink notable in the water, he ordered the servants use a knife to carve a line on the outside of the boat to make the water line. Then he got the elephant off the boat. So the water, and because the water and this boat is go up again, and you can see the line go up again. So then what did he did? He ordered all the servants, put all the rocks on the boat. And the boat will sink in again until the same mark. Then they weighed all the rocks. Then figure out the weight of the elephant. Have you guys figured out that yet? Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Sometimes it's good to jump over the spoiler alert and just go for the essence of the thing. That is awesome. Thank you. That's cool. Ivan, can you share with us one or two illustrations of like how could there be a book about 3 times 4? How could 12 different kids do it 12 different ways? I don't get it.
Yeah, there's
a little glimpse.
a good question. Well, they also are allowed to group things into 2 times 6 or even 1 times 12 or four things that are in sets of 3. So they're kind of thinking in terms of grouping. And, I mean, one thing I'm sort of self-conscious too, being like a middle-aged white dude here on the screen. And I just wanted to have a class sort of like.
Bring it closer.
Oh, yeah. Classes like that I might have had as a kid. I mean, I grew up, my family moved to Chicago when I was 8 years old. So, there was a diversity. I just kind of thought, just treat it as a natural thing. And I try not to make an issue of it. Of course, it would be absurd of me too, because I'm just the demographic I'm in, right? But I think there's one kind of interest. There's a couple funny ones, and I really like drawing the kid that divided up. He has like a little monster toy collection. Hard to see it here, and then he draws a monster that has 4 heads, 4 legs, 4 tails. So he thinks of it as 4 things in sets of 3, but you could do things that are 3 times 4. So there's you can subdivide them in many ways, and I think
they use their imagination to decide how to make the set. So he uses
Exactly.
monster toys. That's part of it.
He's a really smart kid. He figures out, like with a graph paper, how to
Great.
do it really scientifically. And then there's the kid who's like, I don't really want to do the project, so I'm just going to draw 4 baseballs, 4 bats, 4 gloves. And I'm sorry, 3 baseballs, 3 bats, 3 gloves, 3 baseball caps. Okay, I'm done. So there's some humor in it. I try to show like different personalities. And there's another one where somebody they're thinking of rows of 2 and 6 of flowers. And then the other kid is like, I'd rather just draw a dozen donuts and make them all different. So the whole thing was trying to find little, I'm talking too much during this, but I try to find humor in these situations. And so the kids are having what I hope seemed like natural conversations kids would have, and there's jokes and back and forth. And I think part of the thing I'd like to do with kids' books is bring that element of humor. Like once you introduce the concept, I think the kids are smart enough to get it pretty quickly. And I try to. always think in terms of like, I have faith in them that they not only understand the concept, but if I introduce a joke or something playful with it that kind of bends it.
Thank you for the
they will
playful.
get-
Ivan, I'm going to jump in because we've got two amazing folks that we haven't heard from at all yet, and we're needing to wrap up here. But thank you to this amazing group of 4 fantastic Mathical authors. I'm seeing in the chat that folks are interested in more Spanish and English books. I'm seeing lots of love for all 4 of your books. There are many more. And it's time for me to say thank you again. Let's all say thank you to these 4. And I'm going to welcome up our next 2 folks, introduce them, and I'm going to get out of the way because we've got a great second half coming up. Thank you very much for getting us going on this conversation. Welcome back, friends. All right. Now for something both in the same vein and completely different. Here we go. All right. I'm going to introduce 2 marvelous human beings and get out of the way. Pamela Williams currently serves as the Parent Child Plus Washington Program Director. She's a member of the Home Visiting Services Account, HUB team within Washington. Formerly, she was the Family Literacy Program Manager for the School District of Philadelphia Office of Early Childhood, where she managed Parent Child Plus in Philadelphia from 2005 to 2013, and the Even Start Family Literacy Program for over 10 years. Ms. Williams has worked in the field of family literacy for over 20 years and holds a BA from Temple University and an MS from Drexel University. And Jermel Witherspoon has been actively involved in equity and inclusion work for over 10 years, is passionate about creating safe, inclusive spaces of learning and growth for marginalized communities. Jermel is a program manager at Zeno, is fervent about pulling out the innate brilliance of children and families of color through Zeno's work and learnings. Jermel believes math is innately a part of our being and works hard to pull out the brilliance inside of every child he encounters. I can't wait to hear more. Let me get out of the way. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, hi, Mr. Jamel. It's good to have you with us today.
Good to be here.
And for us to talk about how math is racial equity. So in your work at Zeno, the mission at Zeno is to spark joy and inspire love of math in young children and families through racial equity, family engagement, and play, all centered in the experiences of communities of color. So my first question to you is, tell me, how can adults and children emerge together as leaders in a new world that cherishes all children as mathematicians? And you can also then talk about how representation, I know some of the authors had already talked about it, but from your perspective, how does representation in children's literature help create a more equitable world?
Yeah, thank you, Pam. I'm so happy to be here. So first of all, this co-creation, right? This co-creation that comes between children and their parents and their families, the beautiful minds that our children possess. I absolutely love how the question started off, because oftentimes we don't give children enough credit. And I heard a lot coming from those who had these amazing books that talked about, right, kind of the play and talked about the ways in which, I forgot who it was, but they talked about kind of talked about children understanding, right? And an idea of children understanding in a deeper way. And so we do this thing at Zeno, right, where we are always encouraging the parents and those who are the parenting adults of children to allow children to explore. We find that children are so freaking brilliant, and oftentimes they will explore something and pull out something in what we have created that we did not even think about. And so it is amazing. One of the things that we do, especially when we're centering ourselves in this racial equity work, Equity of all kinds. When we deal with people that are in the margins, that have been pushed to the margins, oftentimes what we do in dominant society, we assume that we know, right, what folks who are pushed to the margins need. We assume that we know what they want. We assume that we know what will bring about the responses that the system wants in order to feed the system in a certain way. And we often do that with our kiddos because they are, right, so vulnerable, and because they are kiddos, and because they couldn't have ideas. And the beauty about our kiddos are that they live into a world that oftentimes very early in our existence we deviate from. And so the purity of thought, the ways in which they see things without having the compiling of, again, ideal in systems, right? The compiling of what should be or what has to be is just beautiful, and it brings a world of imagination. And so as we are looking at our kiddos, and as we are co-creating with our kiddos, and as we are allowing our kiddos to explore, and all of the work that we do, and as work emerges, it is absolutely essential that we do it as partners with the brilliant minds of kiddos. And then that second portion about, can you repeat that second part of the question?
How does representation in children's literature help create a more equitable world?
So representation in literature, we're talking about literature, but not just literature, everything that children sees around them, right, in the early learning experiences. So from what they see in their classroom, making sure that that reflects what they see at home, making sure that it reflects not just their skin color, but their culture, that reflects the beauty that comes from, mom's cooking in the kitchen, maybe Ethiopian food, or these different types of beauties that sometimes we have pushed out, especially in the Americanizing way of things. We've taken sometimes culture, or the American system has taken culture, and we've made it so just kind of so counter what it is that children should be learning. Language, heart language, right? There was once a time where children could not speak that in classrooms. And so now, as we incorporate all those things back into the learning and say, actually, right, you should embrace the fullness of who you are. It's absolutely essential that we in children's books are allowing children to see that we, little black, little Hispanic, little this, little that, children that are being raised by grandparents, children that are being raised by two mommies. All of these things are absolutely essential when we're looking and when we're reading books, because children need to see. It's almost like the doll effect. It's like you get little children, right, and for so long there were not dolls for little black girls, right, and so they couldn't see themselves in the beauty of the doll's hair and all of the things that made the doll who it was, and made them who they are. And so when we see the representation in books, right, we see the smiles that come to children's faces when their experiences are there. I see the smiles that come to little black boys' faces when they see me in the space teaching math, right? It's not something that's a wow, like we don't do that, because it is innately in people of color, people of the global minority. Oftentimes, right, have put us as a minoritized people, but the truth is, right, we are people of color. People who have been pushed generally are the people who are the global majority. And so there's so much to learn from all that is around us, and that really should be incorporated into the classroom.
And when you were talking about that, and I was thinking about Julia's book, The Girl with a Mind for Math. And I was like, I remember seeing the cover, but I didn't read the story. And I'm just like blown away. Just another story of a brilliant African American woman whose story was hidden, right? And then I'm fascinated also by Hidden Figures, another story of African American women that was hidden for a long time. And I'm always curious about what other stories don't we know, right? So if you had a magic wand, right, and you could, Jamel, what would you change about how we learn math in our families and classrooms? Like, what would you change or what would you do? And then how could math then be a positive force, or how is math a positive force for social change?
Mm. I think what I would change first off is the thought that math is so far away. The thought that math is so far away and that it needs to be kind of brought into our sphere of influence. And I think that when you do that, you have the kiddos, right, who want to bring it into their sphere of influence because they're memorized by what is so far away that now, right, they are given accolades for being able to do, right. But that also sets this hierarchy, right, of standards that like some can do it and some can't. So you bring in this very far away thing that some are good at and some are not. And you sit it in front of the folks, and there are some folks who are good at it, some that are not, some that are praised about it, and then some who just feel so broken because they don't get it in the ways that others do. And I think the truth is, right, we are all math people, and math is not far away. Math is here, math is right now, math is right in the midst of us, math is innately a part of us. And so I think that there are folks who really just need to be actually not just folks, but kiddos and families, right, who really just need to be centered in the fact that, like, you can release yourself from the stress that says something far away is coming in, right, to like kidnap you and make you feel like you're not smart. And then you can embrace the fact that something that is here and now and you is actually assisting you in your everyday. It is a part of you in your everyday. And I think when we come at it from a different attitude and play, right? We talk about play, making sure it's fun, making sure it's not something that's overwhelming and overbearing. I think all those things would be ideal for me as it pertains to how we are reimagining and how we are thinking about math and how we are letting it just kind of fester and just infiltrate our minds and the hearts of our family kiddos.
Yeah, and I love how a lot of the authors talked about how math sits in so many different spaces. One talked about music and rhythm and puzzles and all of these things where math sits. And these authors have phenomenal books, but sometimes, this world or genre is not as robust, I think, for little children as we would all wish and hope it to be. So I know you do something at Zeno, which is called Mathematizing. Can you tell us what is mathematizing?
Okay, so mathematizing books, actually, it's something that we do because oftentimes we found that books that are math books don't have a lot of representation in them. They don't have a lot of people just in general. They don't have a lot of folks who are from different spheres of influence and different spaces in the world and all these different things. And so we find books that are actually just books that you would generally focus on the literature of the book. And we find math concepts that are in the books, whether it be through shapes, through sizes, through repetition, through all sorts of different concepts. And we mathematize the book.
Okay. And can you give us an example of a book that you've mathematized?
There is a book called Last Stop on Market Street, and I wish I had the book. I was supposed to actually, and left it at home because I am in my office. But it is a beautiful book. I invite you to actually get it. It's The Last Stop on Market Street, and kind of the preface of the book is we're walking through the book with a grandmother and her grandson, a Black grandmother and her Black grandson who are experiencing life in such a beautiful way. And when you open the book, we do this thing called book walks. And so we examine kind of the front pages of the book. We allow the child to really think about what might come next, some predictions, right, which are math. We talk about, when you open the book and you see it on the front, you see all sorts of different shapes because it's a big city. There are buses and there are round wheels and there are big houses. And there are so many things in even the first few pages of the book that are so math. And we don't necessarily look at it from that perspective, but it's important because when you don't have a lot of books that are math books that actually are very intentional about diversity, about equity, about all these different racial spaces and different understandings of who people are and how they are, then you got to kind of rely on what you have, and you got to find the math in it, because math is all around us, it's everywhere, and it's all in the books that we read.
Okay, thank you so much, Jamel.
Yeah.
I love having conversations with you about math and the beautiful work that Zeno is doing in community, and ensuring representation is all at the center of everything that you do, and really the innate beauty and brilliance of children and their families. So with that, I am going to, I don't know if we're having questions, or is Sarah going to come on screen? All right. You're muted, Sarah. Okay.
I guess Sarah is coming on screen. So thank you so much. That was so wonderful. And Jermel, you brought us full circle, because the first Windows, Mirrors, and Doors we did featured Matt de la Pena, who wrote Last Stop on Market Street.
Cool.
So we have come full circle, and that was just a wonderful description of mathematizing, and what a perfect book to pick to do that. So thank you both so much. This has been a really wonderful event, and we are so delighted to have closed it with the two of you. I still have my head spinning about all this math as someone who did not think they were good at math when they were a kid. But also have my head spinning with this idea that our existence is one big math class. So that is just an amazing image. And Jermel, I think you really fed right into that with all of the things that we can and should be doing with young children around how math is all around them. And it's totally something that they can use and enjoy and thrive with. So thank you both very, very much. I think we are going to wrap up right now, because we don't have any pending questions. We've got lots of requests for resources. So please know, everybody, that you're going to be getting a link to Zeno's site. You're going to be getting lists of lots of wonderful books by the authors we met today, and by some other authors too. And I'm just going to close by thanking you all so much for this incredibly rich conversation. We hope that everyone who is listening comes away from it thinking of themselves and the children they know, love, and care for as mathematicians. We look forward to sharing resources out with you, but also hearing back from all of you about other math resources that you love. So you can always send those suggestions to info@parentchildplus.org, and we'll share them out with the rest of this wonderful community. So I just want to close by thanking all of our participants today, and by saying that at Parent Child Plus, we are committed to making sure that all children have the opportunity to see themselves in the books they read and the math they do, and that all children are able to dream big about what they will be when they are big. So thank you for giving us so many wonderful examples of that today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
See ya. Thank you.